Chavre, how are you? I hope everyone is gesund, stark, und freilich, begashmis und beruchnis. I hope everyone is healthy, strong, and happy physically and spiritually. Today is Erev Shabbos Kodesh, Parshas Terumah. We're in the month of Adar, Mishenichnas Adar, Marben Besimcha. This Tuesday is Emir Hashem Zayin Oder, the Yom Lula and Yom Ledes of Moshe Rabbeinu. And what is the connection between all these things? Before we start, as usual, we start with Tzedakah, Gdeilat Tzedakah Shemakareves Sagula. Mashiach should come right now. Then we'll say a prayer which is directly connected to what we're going to speak about today, and that is what we say 3 times a day after Shmoneh Esrei. Yehi Rotzoin Yirotzim Ufanecho Hashem Elokeinu v'Elokei Sheiboneh Beis Hamikdash b'meira v'yomeinu v'seichel keinu v'seresecho. May it be your will, Hashem, that the Beis Hamikdash be speedily rebuilt in our days, and grant us our portion in your Torah. So, in this week's Parsha is the pasuk, which you can interpret to mean that it's one mitzvah connected to the building of the Mishkan and the Beis Hamikdash. It's one mitzvah. Vasali Migdash v'shachanti b'seichem. That's in this week's Parsha. It says you should make Vasali Migdash v'shachanti b'seichem. Thou shalt make me a sanctuary so that I may dwell among them. Now the truth is, those that learn Chassidus Chabad understand that it could very well be that this pasuk, in a certain sense, is the story of existence. Not only existence, but of course, the totality of Judaism, of Yiddishkeit, and the totality of existence. We've spoken about this many times. The Alter Rebbe, in chapter 36 of Tanya, says something that every time I think about it, it gives me a whole new appreciation for the Alter Rebbe, but also the statement itself. The Rebbe chose this statement as one of the 12 verses that children should know by heart. And the Alter Rebbe writes in chapter 33 of the Tanya, V'zeh kol adam. This is the purpose of all of man. V'sachlis b'riyosei, and why it was created. Uvrias kol ilmus, and the creation of all the worlds. El yoynim v'sachteinim, upper worlds and lower worlds. Lias le'dina zeh b'tachteinim, so that Hashem should have a dwelling place down here in this world. Now, it's so startling, stupendous, amazing, on so many levels. Here the Alter Rebbe is telling every single Jew why he exists. What am I doing here? Everyone knows the famous book by Viktor Frankl, Man's Search for Meaning. The nature of man is that he's searching for meaning, and only by finding meaning and purpose will he have true happiness. And most people don't know what they're doing here. And here, the Alter Rebbe tells us that this is the purpose of the everything. That means, imagine I went over to some secular scientist and I told him that in our circles, a child 3 years old was already taught that Mars, Venus, Jupiter, the sun, the moon, and that's only physical reality. But all of the whole spiritual cosmos, whatever you want, it's all that he should be on this planet Earth and make a bracha, shahakal liyah b'dvarei. Wow! But that's the way it is. We're not over here. I'm not trying to convince somebody. I'm not philosophizing. And we're not having debates. First, I got to tell you the way it is, according to our education and what the Torah says. Now, the Chidush Nifla of the Alter Rebbe is that without the Alter Rebbe, and I think I probably spoke about this many times, without the Alter Rebbe, someone could look at this pasuk and say, V'asali Migdash v'shachanti b'seicha, make me a sanctuary and I will dwell in them. That this is one of the 613 mitzvahs, and it is taka one of the 613 mitzvahs. That Hashem says He wants to have a home on this planet Earth. The Alter Rebbe took this mitzvah and really said that it's the totality of all of the 613 mitzvahs. It's behind everything. And actually, one of my mashpiyim, Rabbi Tzibul, he once said in a shir that, you know what? Any question you have in Judaism, this is what he said. Any question you have on Judaism, attach it, think of it in terms of dira b'tachtonim, a dwelling place down here below, and that should give you the answer. Why? Because of everything. Everything is about dira b'tachtonim, that Hashem desires a dwelling place down here below. That means there's nothing that's not related to it. That's the tachlis, that's the end. So therefore, that's the purpose. That's what it's all about. So therefore, that's the answer to whatever concept you're going to think about. Everything's connected. Everything and everything is connected to dira b'tachtonim, a dwelling place down here below. So the Alter Rebbe connects a medrash which says, Nis'ave HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Hashem desired Liyas Leis Baruch, dira b'tachtonim, a dwelling place down here below. And this is what's brought over here in our pasuk, that Hashem says, "V'osuli mikdash, make me a sanctuary, v'shechanti b'seichem, and I will dwell in them." So it's not only about a building, the Mishkan and the Mikdash, which that's what it discusses in this week's Parsha, all the utensils and how they're supposed to be made, and the dimensions and the measurements, but it's about the entire world becoming, in a certain sense, a sanctuary for Hashem. So obviously, there's many questions. Hashem is all over. What does it mean that he has a dwelling place down here below? And there's a famous line that's brought down Chassidus Chabad, without getting into details. Again, this is such a huge subject. We can give 30 shiurim just on this subject alone, and how the Rebbe and all of his talks, Likutei Sichos, dira b'tachtonim, I would say, is the number one subject. Anyways, the Alter Rebbe also said, Afataiva is Nidokin Kasha, Freknishkin Kasha. This is what Hashem desired. And sometimes it says, why he desired, we don't know. But that he desired, we do know. And that's what it says in the Medrash, Nis'ave HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Liyas Leis dira b'tachtonim. But as in every single situation, we have to understand what is the meaning of it. V'osuli mikdash v'shechanti b'seichem, in particular, in relation to the Parsha and the commentaries and the Jewish nation in general. So, first of all, I just want to say a famous word that comes together with this thing, which you could ask, Hashem is all over, so what's going on right now that he says he wants to have a sanctuary? So I think I said this once before, there's a famous question, where is God? So, there's two answers that are given. One answer, the Rebbe Shabbos once asked, where is God? And he answered, where is he not? Which is an amazing answer. And they say in the name of the Kotzker, where is God? And then he said, we make room for him. So the first answer is an unbelievable answer because it changes the whole perspective. It's not like we have a question, where is Hashem? And then we have to answer the question. The question's not a question to start with. That's number one. And that's the right approach. But then there's another approach, an avodah, where is Hashem? Where is he going to be felt? Where you make room for him. And that's also true because one of the main principles of Chassidus is that Hashem resides where there is Ein HaKadosh Baruch Hu, like the Alter Rebbe says, that Kedusha, holiness, is Ein E'ela Masha Botel Etzli Yisbarach. You got to make way for the infinity. In order for the infinity to be able to reside and to be felt, you have to become transparent. Don't be an obstruction. Okay, now let's get to what is the unique accomplishment. What does it mean in our service of Hashem that we're making a dwelling place? Because that's really what's more important than everything else. What am I meant to do? So to understand really the accomplishment, we will bring a medrash and then a gemara. And even though I don't want you to get confused, and I'll try to bring it out clear, but the bottom line from both will be the same. First, we'll start with a medrash rabbah. Chabad Lubavitch Chassidim know this very well because in the Maimorim of Yud Shvat, it's always discussed, and that is, there's a pasuk in Shir Hashirim, Kapitel Hey, the first pasuk says, Bo silagani achisikala. Hashem says, I came to my garden. And the medrash on that pasuk, Bo silagani achisikala, where Hashem says, I came to my sister, my bride, I came to my garden. The medrash on that says, the famous medrash, it says, Lagan, Enksiv Khan, it doesn't say, I came to a garden, El Lagani, to my garden. L'makam shay ikar b'tchila, ikar shchina b'tachtoinu ma'isa. Hashem created the world, and the world was filled with the glory of Hashem, with divine revelation. But then the Medrash explains that there were 7 sins, starting from the Chet, Eitz Hadas, and then there were 7 tzaddikim that came corresponding to the 7 bad things that came, that caused the Shekhinah to depart from this world in a revealed way. And then Moshe Rabbeinu, the 7th, came and he brought down the Shekhinah. So in other words, according to the Medrash, when the Medrash says, Bo silagani, I came to my garden, to where I was previously, my garden, the Makom Shayikah B'tchila, is referring to what day did it happen? According to the commentators, when does Hashem say Basi Lagani? On Rosh Chodesh Nisan, after the Mishkan was erected. And when he comes down into the Mishkan. And over here, Chassidus asked the question, but L'chaira, Matan Torah. Matan Torah was the greatest revelation. You could say it's the greatest event in the history of mankind, and of course the greatest event in the history of Yiddishkeit. So by Matan Torah, which was Vav Sivin, God himself came down into the mountain, and then almost a year later, on Rosh Chodesh Nisan, was when Hashem came down, when Hashem came down into the Mishkan. But when did he say Basi Lagani? The Makom Shayikah B'tchila. When is it really considered that he comes down? And he says, Basi Lagani, L'makom Shayikah B'tchila. The husband tells the wife, Hashem tells Kas Yisrael, I'm back home. And he says that when we make V'asuli Migdash, V'shachanti B'soicham, when we make the Dira B'tachtoinim, we make the Dira B'tachtoinim, as we'll soon explain. Then Hashem says, I'm back to my home. So we have to understand what's the difference between Matan Torah, which, according to all the explanations of Chassidus, it was the most unbelievable accomplishment, which broke the barrier, the separation and the division between heaven and earth, spiritual and physical. And the answer is, because Sof Kol Sof, Matan Torah was an act of Hashem. As Hashem says, V'ani Maschil, there was a decree, and he says, I will begin, V'yered Avai Har Sinai. So in other words, Matan Torah is more the idea of an act of God. Over here, what does it mean? V'yichli Terumah. Terumah is Miloshen HaRama. It's how man elevates physical objects and makes a contribution to Hashem, and he offers it up to Hashem. So what's greater? Let's say, for example, we're talking about a king. What's going to be a bigger accomplishment? If a king decides that he wants to barge into someone's house and say, get out of my way, here I am, I'm the king. Or when you work and you prepare and you make your home the most beautiful home, and then you invite the king, and the king chooses to come to your home because you worked on yourself to prepare the home for the king. So here we get to a concept. The truth is, there's many concepts that we connected to this, but over here we come to the concept where in Chassidus we say Dira B'tachtoinim, but it's not only that the Eibishter desires a dwelling place down here below, he wants a Dira B'tachtoinim Mitzat Tachtoinim. It should come from within, from us. And I was once by a simcha, and Rabbi Chaim Gutnick gave a speech, and he asked the question, what's the most holiest place for the Jewish nation? Most people will answer, the Kaisel HaMaravi. And then they asked, well, how come Kaislam Baravi, not Mount Sinai? So first of all, he said, because Mount Sinai is not necessarily, do we know where Mount Sinai is? But then he said, because Mount Sinai represents Har Sinai, the way Hashem came down the mountain. V'aniya Maschil. But the Kaislam Baravi represents the place where the Eden served Hashem. A greater accomplishment is not that the Eibishter could do anything. A greater accomplishment is when man elevates himself and works on himself and becomes worthy of Hashem residing over there. And this has to be brought straight away. Everyone says the famous Ma'amad Azal, it doesn't say that Hashem will dwell in it. It's not about the building. It's not about the physical space necessarily, but every person has to make himself worthy of becoming a home for Hashem. And the same thing in your private home. So that explains from that medrash of Shir Hashirim, Basi Legani Legnuni. And by the way, what does it mean Legnuni? What does the medrash say? Legnuni means I came to my garden to my bridal canopy. Now, some people explain that it means like in the garden, we have the section that only the bride and the groom go to, like the yichud room, so to speak. In other words, they reach a new level of intimacy from here on in. That means that the way Hashem filled the world, let's go back to the medrash, before the Chet Eitz Hadas, it was that Hashem filled the world. Okay, again, it wasn't really an accomplishment because it wasn't that the world refined itself. When Hashem created the world, He filled the earth. But it didn't prove the idea that man in an environment when he has an evil inclination, when he's in the mundane reality of Melbourne, New York City, wherever it is, and he works on himself to elevate himself, to make himself one with Hashem from his natural habitat, from his natural environment, so to speak. And that's the accomplishment, Bosi Legani Legnuni, because now it represents from here on in the fact that the Jews bring from physical objects and make a contribution to the Eibishter, Terumah. We elevate the world, we refine ourselves, then it shows a deeper level of intimacy between us and Hashem, that we become united, and we're not united because Hashem decided, superimposed from above, to reside here, but we refined ourselves and made ourselves a vehicle and an instrument, so it comes from within. Now I'm just going to say another place where we see this idea, but in this idea, it's not that the Mishkan corrected, so to speak, was misaken, something which went back to 2,000 plus years before, from the time of Chet Eitz Hadas, from Adam till the story of the Mishkan, there was a certain level of separation where only the day the Mishkan was built does Hashem say, Bo Silagani, I'm back. And why? Because from there now it comes from us, from within. We're inviting Hashem in. We are refining ourselves, working on ourselves, so that we should be a true vehicle for Hashem. Now there's another Gemara, and this brings out another connection between Adar, Purim. The story of Purim is similar to this story. There's a Gemara, and the Gemara is in Shabbos, Daf Peiches Amar Aleph. Everyone knows the famous Gemara, where the Gemara says over there that Hashem, this is Sugya Matan Torah, where it says Hashem was Kof Aleim Har Kigigas. Hashem turned over the mountain on the top of the nation of the Jews like a barrel, and He said, either accept the Torah or this will be your burial place. That's what the Gemara says. Anyways, Omer Rabbi Yaakov said, Mikan Midor Rabbe Raisa. Here we have a major complaint, like a substantial argument, a claim against the whole fulfilling of the Torah. Why? Because based on this Gemara, it seems that we were forced to accept it. So, how can we be obligated to fulfill something, we were forced to do it. But the Gemara says, nevertheless, when was this situation made right? When did this claim fall away? In the days of Achashverosh, almost 1,000 years later. The Chsiv, it says in the Megillah, Kimu v'kiblu ha'Yehudim. That in the Megillah it means that the Jews accepted upon themselves this whole celebration of Purim for the future. But the Gemara learns out from this, Kimu mashe kiblu kvar. The Yidden fulfilled then which they already received in Matan Torah. Only after the story of Purim does it mean that we fully accepted it. What does it mean? I'm not getting into the whole meaning of the Gemara over there. What does it mean that we were coerced? There's the way it is al pi pshat and the way it is al pi chassidus. I'll just say the way it is al pi chassidus. That it means, it's very different than the simple meaning of the Gemara, but it means that we were overwhelmed by the miracles. By Matan Torah, there's no way that we wouldn't accept the Torah. We were coerced because of the revelations. Imagine you have a chassan and kala, and the chassan gives the girl, they're going on a date, he gives her a diamond bracelet, a diamond necklace, a diamond watch, a diamond ring, and he's just showering her with gifts and gifts and gifts, and he makes her like a deal she can't refuse. It's so amazing. I'm just calling it that. There were so many miracles, the age of Yetzias Mitzrayim, the 10 Makkos, Kriyas Yamsuf. It wasn't possible not to accept the Torah. But according to Chassidus, the accomplishment of Purim was that it was not a miracle that was against nature. It was a nes hamalubash b'teva. In other words, it was more natural with the rules of the world. And that's what it means. Kimu v'kiblu. What does it mean? What's real v'kiblu? When does Judaism really become part of you? Not when you accept it because of extraordinary circumstances, not because you accept it because there are miracles, but even in a natural situation where there's nothing compelling you positively, and still you accept it, so then it proves that it's real. In other words, let's go back to the similar word that we brought from the Medrash. When does Hashem say, Basi Lagani, I'm really home? When it comes from the Yidden. It's an act of man. It comes from within. The same thing over here. Kimu v'kiblu. Similar contrast. Matan Torah was more like an act of God. God superimposed himself above us with the miracles. He showed us his hand that he could do anything. Unbelievable revelations. Purim, there were no revelations. It was all natural. And still, we really accepted it. And that's what really called kiblu. That's what it means. They really accepted it. Because it wasn't something that had to take something that was the opposite of nature. This means that it's real, that it's coming from within, from a normal Wednesday afternoon, in a normal situation, where we don't see divine revelations, and still we're one with Hashem. That means that we're really serving Hashem properly. So we see from both places this very, very fundamental point, that Avodas Hashem has to be from within. And this is really, really the lesson we have to take from Parshas Terumah, working on ourselves, that it comes from within. Like, for example, let's talk about a bacher from yeshiva. We say, when do you really know what it's at? Not when he's doing the right thing, when the faculty is looking at him, but what does he do in his free time? That shows what he really is all about. The same thing is about the Gemara that says a person in Yerushalayim should be for the Eibishter as it is for a bus of a dome. What does that mean? That means sometimes you have people behind closed doors that act one way, but in public they act another way. But really it should be the real person. It doesn't make a difference. He's not doing something externally. It's really him. And the connection to Moshe Rabbeinu is Zayin Oder. In the Medrash, I don't know if I mentioned it before, when it says that Moshe Rabbeinu was the seventh tzaddik that came after the seven negative sins that happened. And it says he's the seventh, v'chol hashivin chavivin, and all the seventh are beloved. So he's the one that accomplishes the greatest thing. He actually makes it happen. להמשיך השכינה דו למטה בארץ. Every other tzaddik beforehand brought it down one floor, so to speak, one level. But who made it happen in this world? Moshe Rabbeinu, the seventh. V'chol hashivin chavivin, all the seventh are beloved. And the same thing we could say like Zayin Adar is the seventh. That Zayin Adar is the beloved. So we should utilize this week, Emir Hashem, Zayin Adar in a very powerful way. In general, this message of V'osuli Migdosh V'shachanti B'seicham shows on an engagement with the world, not a disengagement. This is also a very general message, very much befitting with Chassidus. The point is, the Eibishter wants that we should take the world and work with the world. Just like by the whole idea of the Mikdash and the Mishkan was taking physical objects and transforming them and elevating them and utilizing them and channeling them to Kedusha. So that's the general idea of our lives. That Kol Masecha Yil Shem Shemayim, Masecha, your action should be for the sake of heaven. Uv'chol derechecha de'eyu, and all your ways you should know Him. Not only when you're in the Beis HaMikdash, and when you're in the shul, but 24/7. And this is also connected with the Rabbi used to speak many times about every house should become a Chabad house. Every house is a mini sanctuary, not only like the shul. Your house becomes a home for Hashem. And just to give an example of what it means, like a different mindset, there's a famous story about a certain chassid, Binyamin Kletzke. Kletzke means timber. He worked in such a field, such a profession. Timber, logs. Anyways, he was once standing at the riverbank where the work was done. They were cutting the trees and putting it on transport, whatever it is. And he was lost in thought. So one of his workers asked him afterwards or something, what were you thinking about? So he answered, I was thinking about Echad, Hashem Echad. So the guy made a wonder. Like he was surprised. You're in the middle of the business and you think about Hashem Echad. He said, the Shail is nicht was mit Tracht wegen Echad mitten Kletzke. Now the Shail is for was mitten Echad Tracht wegen Kletzke. So the Binyamin Kletzke answered, the question is not why I was thinking about Hashem Echad in the middle of the timber, in the middle of the business. The question is why when people say Shema Yisrael Hashem Echad, they're thinking about their timber, they're thinking about their business. So this is the lesson we have to take from today. Our connection to the Eibishter has to become like the default position. That's what it means. I'm home. Home is where I feel myself. Home is where my essence is expressed. Home is the real me. My serving the Eibishter shouldn't be one of the things that I do, besides everything else, but that's who I am. That's my natural state of mind. That's my natural awareness. That's my natural consciousness. So the Eibishter should help, that we should do our part, that Hashem should be our natural consciousness, like the story of the Yom Kletzke. And this will help bring about the Mitzvah Hashem Bezim Yisborech, that we'll see the ultimate Sheiboneh Beis HaMikdash b'meidro v'yomeinu v'seichel keinu b'seder seichel. We'll see the revelation where the entire world, in a revealed way, will become a Dilei Yisborech b'tachtonim, and in particular we'll also see the Binyan Beis HaMikdash HaShlishi take it from a yad mamish. Posting from my home, Ezra Hashem Yisborech, your man in Melbourne.